morning, everyone, and welcome to today's live webinar. My name is Taylor Hempel, and I'm a marketing specialist here at ESC Spectrum. We're excited for you to join us during our session, Prism 2.0 in a nutshell. Today, we have our very own software architect, Landon Zabcik, who will be diving into the latest release of our data acquisition system, Prism version 2.0. Landon will walk us through the new features and latest enhancements, improving your experience with Prism. As we go through the webinar, we encourage you to place any questions you might have in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. At the end of the session, Landon will answer to the best of his ability. With that being said, let's begin.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Like Taylor said, my name is Landon Zabcik, software architect here at ESC Spectrum, working primarily on the SpectraView Prism DAS product. This webinar is our fall update. So for Prism, we do typically 2 releases a year. This is our second release of 2024 that just came out, Prism 2.0. It is a major release. So in this webinar, I'll kind of be going through talking about mainly just the features that we've added in this new release, what you can expect as you start using it. If we have time at the end, I'll mention a few bug fixes, but we do have a lot in this webinar, so I'll try to kind of cram it all in. Yeah, if you have any questions, like Taylor said, just put those in the chat, and I will go over those when we get to the end. So a little outline for today's presentation. I'm going to do the normal platform and technology update, show you guys where we are on that as far as our product and what technologies and platforms we run on, give a little update about the release. Then I'll kind of dive in and go through all the features and fixes that have gone into that release and what you might expect when you start using it. And then if we have time, a little 2.1 future plans or bug fixes as well, kind of go over those a little bit at the end. So 8864 update. Again, Prism's been supporting the 8864 for quite a while, quite a few releases. The last release, 1.9, had support for the 884 Gen 2, which most of you should know. We're moving to the generation kind of models of the 8864s as those come out a little more frequently and a little less drastically than before. So we do support the regular 8864 as well as the 8864 Gen 2 in Prism 1.9 and above. All the future 8864 development and enhancements will be compatible with Prism. So, we're kind of plugged into that design session with the 8864, making sure all those features, integrate well into Prism as well as all the other DAS products. Prism 2.0 does have some software rework around the 8864. It's a brand new Nova communication library. I really won't go into the details of that in the slides because it's really more of a technical thing. But for those of you that don't know, Nova is kind of our cross-team effort here at ESC Spectrum. So across all 5 or 6 of our different products, we'll develop code and libraries and shared resources in what's called Nova, and then we'll distribute those exact same resources across all of the products. So this Prism 2.0 update gets that 8864 Nova communication library into that. That basically just means we have more QA resources going into it. We can get faster and better upgrades and compatibility, more resources working on that library since it is shared across all the products here at ESC Spectrum. For the 8864, Prism 2.1 will include the ability to have generic configuration lines. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but that's the only major update still planned that's not currently in the 8864 as of now. Future plans include a new 8864 communication protocol that hasn't been started on yet. But when that does, Prism will be able to get that communication protocol as well. So that's the 8864, a little technology update. We're currently on .NET Framework 4.8. That was required starting in Prism 1.8. Windows Server 2022, SQL Server 2022, and Windows 11 are recommended. Some notable no longer supported are Windows 7, Windows Server 2012, and SQL Server 2012 starting in Prism 1.9. Again, SQL Server 2012 will not work with Prism 1.9 and above, so make sure you have that upgraded. We do have support ending soon for 2016, but that's currently still supported. Here's just kind of a technology platform diagram of our support timelines. This is shared across all of our technology products. So this is the same with the other DAS products and QA Insight and things like that as well. Just a graph of when those end of lives are coming up. We'll typically try to stick to whatever Microsoft has for their end of life and kind of base it on that. Here's for the Windows client. Again, 7 and 8.1 are out of support. We still haven't decided officially on Windows 10 yet, but Microsoft is pushing to end of life that pretty soon as well. So we'll do what we can to support that, obviously, as long as we can. But like I said, Microsoft is bringing that up kind of quickly as far as when they're going to retire that. Okay, so a little bit about the release. The current release released just a few days ago, beginning of August here, is Prism 2.0. That is a major release, our first major release in quite a few years. So we'll do, dot releases 1.6, 1.7, 1.8. And those are generally pretty compatible across the board as far as upgrades, mixing client and servers as well, things like that. But a major release, like a new major version number, like 2 versus 1. You can expect that to be a little more maybe incompatible with older releases. So keep that in mind when upgrading. Try to upgrade all your sites at once. It's not as designed to be as compatible as 1.7 would be with 1.8. So just kind of keep that in mind. Some of the major upgrades to this that are notable that I'll go over in this presentation are licensing, the way the application launches. Another big enhancement is the ECMPS module redesign. We really spent a lot of time on that. I think you're going to enjoy the new layout of that and the ease of use of that. Continued ECMPS 2.0 support, some additional administration pages, and some technical updates like the new 8864 control library I went over earlier. For Prism 2.1, that'll be in January, so that's currently under development. That's what we're working on now. The big item there that was going to come out that we have confirmed for that release is going to be user configurable dashboards. The dashboards that are in Prism right now, you probably know, are done by development and support. You tell us kind of what you need on the dashboard. We'll configure those, write those up for you, and store those with your system. Starting in Prism 2.1, you will be able to do your own version of the dashboards. Drag and drop your controls, point them where you want to be able to see what you want, save and modify those. That's been a big user request, so that's coming in the next version. We do have some other couple possible items that we haven't decided if they're going to be in 2.1 yet or not, but those are on the table as well. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go into each one of these features. Just kind of take note of some of these if they may affect you kind of as you start using Prism 2.0. We are implementing a new licensing scheme. This is the ESC Spectrum standard licensing scheme that is the same across all the products. So Prism is now getting this new license check. This is an encrypted JSON license file that can be downloaded from the community link. So when you go into the community, there should be an option for you to download your license file for all of your sites. Just click on it, download it, and then Prism will have a place where you can import that license, and then you're good to go. It typically works with your SMA or whatever those contract agreements are. So when that expires is typically your license expiration date. You will get a notification when you launch the client if you have about 60 days until the license expires. It's just a little notification down the taskbar. At 30 days, you'll continue to get that notification, and then a warning alarm will be turned on. And then we do turn on an expiration alarm, and things can stop working, obviously, when the license is expired. So here's a look at what it looks like in the About page. So if you have the main application up, you go to Administration and About, where you'll see the version of Prism you're running and all that kind of stuff. Here's your license as well. So this will be pulled up here. It shows you things like when it was issued, expiration, the different features that you're licensed for, things like that. So if you try to launch the client with no license, so if you install Prism 2.0 or upgrade to Prism 2.0 for the first time, and you launch the client, it will tell you no license and then bring up this screen right here. So you can see it asks you for the license. You basically just hit the button there on the right with the three dots to browse, select your license file, and then the save button will become enabled. Hit save, and that should be it. The system will be licensed, and you can start it right up. Here's a look at what you may see running the server installer. So the server installer does now check for a license file. So when you're installing the Prism services and the Prism database, uh, that installer will check for a license file. If it doesn't find one, it will show you this prompt. You can select the license file, upload it right here into the installer. That way, as soon as it's installed, you're ready to go. You can also skip this step as well. It's not required, so you can install the entire product without a license and just put in your license at a later date if you want. So that's it for licensing. Any questions on that, please let us know. Reach out to support. We should be set up with everything we need to get you the new license file for Prism 2.0. Also in Prism 2.0 is we've changed the way that the application is launched. Before Prism 2.0, we would use what's called an SView file. It's basically just a text XML file that contains some configuration in it. And you had to double click on those to launch those to tell Prism, what site you wanted to go to, the different options in your application, things like that. You could not launch the application directly from the Start menu programs. We realize that's a little confusing because most applications you just go to Start, maybe you pull up your application and launch it that way. So we did change that in Prism 2.0. An SView file is no longer required to start Prism. You can go directly to the Start menu, find Prism, and double click on it and launch it, or I guess it's single click to the Start menu. When you do that, there's a sessions kind of window that pops up that shows you any recently used sessions that you've had. You can also do things like set a default session. So you can go anytime you launch from the Start menu, go directly into that particular site if you want. And we did maintain backwards compatibility with the existing SView files. So if you already have those set up, you're already using those at your playing at your site, whatever, you can continue to use those without an issue. Here's the new session window. That's what it looks like when it popped up there. You can see I hit the add new button. So this is the wizard taking you through adding a new session to Prism. So basically, you're going to enter in everything you needed in order for it to connect to a Prism system, which is the database credentials there. You can give it a name, set any options here you want. See the options here on this page as well. Once you've done that, just hit finish. And now that session is stored in that session chooser, so it'll show up here next time you go into it. Here's another screenshot of what that session chooser looks like. You can see we've got 3 different sessions here. You can delete those, you can add new, you can import a session from an SView file at the bottom. Basically, the delete button is there. Once you click on that, it removes it from the session window. And it's basically just a single click on each session to actually launch that session in Prism. Import button is down here at the bottom. Once you click on that, it'll prompt you for the file. This is an SView file, so if you have existing SView files, you'd like to get rid of them, you can go through, import them one at a time into the session chooser, and then you can delete those files. You wouldn't need them anymore. They'd be part of your installation. You can set as default, so there's a hyperlink here for each session to set it as default. Once you do that, you can see this now set as our default. So anytime we launch Prism from the Start menu, wherever, it's going to go directly to that session, which is handy if you really only connect to one instance. So if you have set a default session and you want to unset it or get to the session chooser, you can right click on Prism in the applications menu, and there is an option there to launch without the default session. So it says launch a session, you'll get the session chooser even though you have a default session set. So there's a way to get out of that. Even more configuration exists after you start up the program. So once Prism is up and running, you can go to administration, clients, and startup sessions, and you have full editing capabilities of all the sessions there. So you can remove a default, you can delete them, you can import there, create new ones, things like that as well. So there's multiple areas of configuration there. Okay, so that's the session viewer. Moving on, some of the ECMPS changes. Got quite a few of these. One cool change is the monitoring plan viewer. So if you're familiar with Prism, you have a Part 75 system. This is where you import monitoring plans into your DAS. It has all the information needed to make decisions about how to calculate and qualify data for Part 75. So there was no view button there before. We just allowed you to select the unit, import, set a particular monitoring plan as the default for that particular unit. Now there's a view button, so you can view your current monitoring plan. If you click on that, you'll get the monitoring plan viewer pop-up window. So this is just kind of a handy user interface for looking at what your monitoring plan contains and the information inside of it. There's three main areas, and a lot of our ECMPS viewers kind of follow the same pattern. So this look and feel you'll see in a couple different areas throughout Prism in this new release. Basically, the top left-hand side is the overall monitoring plan properties, things like the monitoring plan version, your ORS code, things like that. Down below that, you have the locations. So this looks like three different units or reporting systems. You can click on those, select them once, and then the information in the right-hand pane will change out based off of your monitoring plan location you've selected. And then it contains all the information about that location on the right-hand side, everything basically that's in your monitoring plan, all the configuration, instruments, all that kind of stuff is in the right-hand side. You can dig through as much as you want, see how it's configured. Right now, it's not really editable. We just have it as a viewer, so you can quickly go in and view your monitoring plan here if you wanted to easily. So kind of hand in hand with that are some of the ECMPS module redesigns. First up for redesign is the emissions tab. So the emissions in the ECMPS module has been overhauled and redesigned pretty much from scratch to do a different kind of workflow. And that kind of follows how the ECMPS module works with other things as well as QA, QC tests that are done, things like that. Basically, when you go into the emissions tab, you'll see a list of previously run emissions reports. If you want to view or resave any of those, you can. Those are just kind of saved automatically anytime you run a report. And you'll be presented with that list of those reports if you want to use them. But then you'll also be able to add a new, which is essentially running a new emissions report, which is what the previous ECMPS module did. So you click that, and all of the report generation and running has kind of the wizard format. So it'll kind of step you through where you set the parameters of what you're trying to report on, what data you want to pull from the DAS and put into your report. And then at the end of the report, you'll be able to view that report in either the emissions viewer or the QA/QC viewer, and then export that report if you need to, and then again, store it automatically so that can be viewed at a later time. So here's kind of a screenshot of what the new emissions screen looks like. So you'll see three panels in the module. And we're selected the emissions panel here. And this screen should look pretty familiar. It kind of follows our administration screens. So you have kind of the middle content area, which is the previously run emissions reports that you have that have been automatically saved. You can select one of those, and then you can see the report history for that selection on the right. So if we run, so let's say we're selecting last quarter's report, we select it, and then we've made a few changes to it. You'll see those show up on the right-hand side, and you can export those to JSON if you want. You can click View Edit, and you'll bring up the report viewer for those as well if you want as well. There's some filtering on the left-hand side that kind of just filters what you want to show up here in the middle. And then you see the create new report is that add button there in the center. So that's what we would hit to actually run a new emissions report. So this is kind of a screenshot example of what this looks like. You can see kind of looking through the previously run reports. We hit the add button to add a new one. Select basically any information that's required to run a report. Select the unit, the time range. It's going to prompt you just like the old ECMPS module where you want to save that, give it a file name and save it, and then it'll go off and start running the report This is similar to the old ECMPS module where it runs it kind of in the background. You can see the log messages coming in down there at the bottom as it kind of goes through all the data, doing all the qualifications, calculations, and generating that report. There is the cancel button here. You can hit that and bail out of it. I don't know that that was in the original module, so that may be a new feature here as well. But as soon as this runs, let's see, it looks like it's about done. Should be complete, and then it's going to give you the emissions viewer pop up. So this is kind of similar to that monitoring plan viewer. This is actually just a way to look at your actual report. You can make changes here if you want. If you change things, there is validation in here and hints and whatever. So if you needed to edit some of your data, you can do it here instead of in Notepad or whatever before submitting it. So you can do that and save it, and then it will be saved and exported to the system. Missing data. So the missing data part of the ECMPS module redesign has been redesigned a little bit. It's now its own tab. It's pretty similar to the other one. I'm just going to kind of go through it quickly. The report basically just is run for a reporting system, start date and end date, and then the report comes up showing you those missing data hours for what you selected. So the linearity has been redesigned. We've actually removed the linearity tab from the ECMPS module, since really linearity is just a sub QAQC report. It's just one type of QAQC report that you can do in your DAS. You kind of move that under a parent QAQC tab. Added a bunch more QAQC tests you can also run. Linearity is just one of those. So it kind of follows the same flow of the emissions. Previous reports are listed. You can add new and kind of step through the wizard to run your linearity report, and then you get the QAQC viewer at the end to show you your potential report. So here's the QAQC tab. You can see these are the different QAQC reports that Prism can currently run. The ones that require DAS data that exists in your DAS are here. So you'll just run those reports and it pulls the data out and generates those for you. So here we clicked on linearity. And this brings up our linearity listing. These are the past linearities we've done. We can filter those a year reporting system if we needed to. We've selected one here. We can view it. So this is the past linearity report we've run. Pulled up the viewer. We can also hit the add button to add a new. This is basically running a new linearity report. You select the time frame, the unit, and here are your linearity tests that you've run that are stored in the DAS. Just select which tests you want to include in your report as a checkbox and hit finish, and then it pops up with what you want to save this report as. And again, it automatically saves it and automatically gives it to you in this viewer for you to kind of proof over it. From here, you can export it, whatever you need to do with it. So pretty handy. Basically, just step through, select your tests. We have added some new QA/QC reports. They follow kind of the same flow of the linearity that you just saw. Basically, your previous reports are listed. You hit the Add New button, and then you wizard through the different parameters that you're required to select for that report. And at the end, you're presented with the viewer or editor for that report. So a little bit of details about this viewer and editor. It does have some validation from the EPA's validation rules. So for this one, for example, test comment can't be empty for this type of test. So all that's in there. A lot of these are drop-down boxes for things like span scale code, for example, has certain values, high, low, whatever. Those are drop-down boxes as defined by the EPA that can be selected. Again, if you use the wizard and do all this correctly, all this should be filled out for you with data from your DASC. But you do have the ability to change this if you want to for some sort of reason. So you have that ability to go in here and override your reports kind of in an easy way without having to use Notepad or do that manually. Yeah, more validation rules here again based on the reporting instructions. So this is kind of an example of when we do the 7-day cal error check here. Just create a new one. And again, all these work similar way. You hit add, you're going to run a new 7-day cal error report. Most of these have some sort of date range, so you would want to do whatever quarter you're running the report from whatever reporting group or instrument you're interested in. And again, we only ask you for information required to generate this report. So nothing, you don't have to specify anything else, just what's needed to run this report. So now we've filtered and shown you all the calibrations for that unit and for that instrument in that time frame. And you can just go through and check which ones you want to include. Those 7 calibrations are included in the report, and then it's going to prompt to save. And then lastly, it'll show you the results of that 7-day cal error test summary report. Looks like test comment maybe is required. So, yep. So it should be fairly easy. All of the QA/QC kind of report generation works that way. And again, last step is it shows you kind of the results of that. So I'll kind of go through these quickly. These are just the wizards for each one of those. Here's the cycle time. QA is creating them. So for the title page on this shows you based off of those time frames what the high gas value and the low gas values are. We've included kind of a little chart that should be able to help you, what values are what during those time ranges. Kind of if you have to specify what those are as you generate the report. Again, there's help text on here. A lot of this is from the EPA. Some of their reporting instructions on how to create cycle time tests. We try to put some of that help text in here for the user to keep things clear when you're doing that. Online offline cal demo, basically select your dates. And again, you're presented with a list of cals for that instrument that fall into those dates. You just select an online followed by an offline, or offline followed by an online, and then you'll hit finish, and then your report's generated. Fuel flow to load, you can still specify whether you're doing a baseline or a test. That'll dictate what page next you get in the wizard, your hours, whether you want to include those or not, and then a baseline if you need to. Same thing for the test, just basically asking you for the required data for the test in the wizard format, whether or not you want to include the hours and create those. Leak check, basically just asking you for the instrument, test reason and result code, end date, test number, and then that'll be created as well. So those are some of the QA/QCs that are added. We tried to make those as easy as possible for adding and creating those, just kind of stepping you through everything that's needed to make those QA/QC tests. Some of the preview features we've added in the ECMPS module. Again, when you launch the ECMPS module, you'll have to hit the little settings button in the top right-hand side of the application to turn on and enable preview features. And once you do that, you'll be able to see these different preview feature options here. One of them is the compliance averages. It's a preview feature. So with all of these, the reason they're preview is we haven't got the JSON schema from the EPA for these yet. So they don't actually create a report, but they are new QA/QC report buttons that are down there. You can click on them and kind of see, what creating those is going to look like. Basically, it's just going to ask you for the information to create those reports. Same thing with the deviation and downtime. They basically just ask you what system start and end date. And similar for unit information, you'll have to select a couple more options on this one. Some of the options that need to go into this, number of events, things like that, you'll need to put in to create this report. So those are all the QA/QC reports that are in the new ECMPS module. So let's say you've created a bunch of QA/QC reports over the course of a quarter. You have some linearities, maybe online, offline cal demo, maybe some fuel flow to loads, and you're ready to report for last quarter, and you want to put all those into a QA/QC file and upload it to the EPA. You've already gone over them, you're satisfied with them, and all that kind of stuff. So we've made that pretty easy. Basically, there's what's called create a master QA/QC report, which is a way of kind of wrapping all those multiple QA/QC reports into a single JSON file or JSON object. that can then be exported and uploaded to the EPA for reporting. So here's a little screenshot of that. There's a create button, create master at the top right. Basically, just click on that, and all we need from you on this is basically a start and an end date. So we could say last quarter if you want, and then you'll be presented with all the QA/QC reports you've run. Remember, we save those automatically every time you run them to the database. So those are all saved here. It's just a pick list. Pick what you want to include, hit finish, and then it saves it to a JSON file, and then it shows you that file in the editor. So you can see we've got a bunch of different linearity test summaries in here, those test records. We've got our 7-day cal error and our online offline we chose as well. So you can see that and then basically export from here and you're ready to go. So that's the ECMPS module redesign. Again, a lot of work on that. Hopefully that's a lot easier and better to use. Make sure your job a little easier as we move more towards the JSON style of reporting. A new actual SQL Server report we wanted to go over is the performance summary report. This has been added in Prism. There's two parts to this. There's a configuration screen that's available in the Prism main application administration section where you need to first go in and configure the performance groups. So that's where you define what a performance group is, what units it is, that kind of stuff as defined by the EPA. And then once that's configured, you can run the performance summary report and get that output. What that looks like. Here's an example screen of the performance group configuration. So you can group the various parameters together, compliance and downtime, create that parameter grouping, performance grouping. And then once that's created, save that. You'll come in here and then it'll show up as a drop-down option on your pollutants here and your units. You'll be able to run this report against those performance parameters. Moving on to some other features. One in the data editor is the automatic locking of data in the data editor. So we've added a new setting in Prism 2.0 that has the ability to automatically lock days after a certain number of days, automatically lock data after a certain number of days. So once that quarter has passed and those number of days have passed, the qualifier will automatically lock those. So that means once data is locked, it can't be recalculated or overwritten without first unlocking the data manually in the system. So this is helpful if you want to prevent someone from going in and accidentally recalculating 5-6-year-old data that you've already submitted that should not be recalculated. Just lock that data and prevent that from happening. So here's where you would do that. Basically go to administration, SIMS and site application configuration, and then enter your, scroll down to the qualifier service. You can see there down at the bottom. And then there's a new variable lock data days. Put that as the number of days that you want before the locking starts. So 365 would give you a year before you start locking data. Put that in there, hit save, and then the qualifier will start doing that automatically going forward. Here's what it looks like when data is locked. You'll see this under the locked data, start and the end date of, this is your 6-minute table here for duct 1B. It's locked starting 7/1/2020. It ends 10/1/2020, so that's 4 years old. The data looks like that should be locked, but you can override and unlock that if you need to from here. It's important to know that once data is locked, the system will not attempt to do anything to that data automatically. You have to go in here to block data and unlock it first. When you try to recalculate locked data, here's a good example. The locked portion of that data, if your recalculation overlaps some portion of locked data, that portion of the data will just be skipped. So it'll recalculate everything, but when it's locked, it will give you this warning. So keep that in mind when setting up your locked data. Another feature we added to the data editor module, this was a common request that we probably should have gotten to earlier. But in any event, if you have data that's missing from an 8864 or any kind of data source, because maybe that 8864 was unplugged, power failure, something like that, you just couldn't get the data at all for a few minutes, but you were online for that time period. What would happen before is that data would be marked missing, but because we didn't have an online signal, we assumed offline. So if that really wasn't the case, then you had to go and manually mark it as online and then mark it as missing data, which was a little cumbersome. So we modified the data editor module and added a completely new task in the data editor module that allows you to go in, select that source that you had the signal problem with, and mark it as both online and missing at the same time. So if you had power off on your 8864 for a couple minutes while the unit was online, you could do this, go in, select those 2 minutes. The data would be marked as online but missing, and your data will be recalculated based off of that. Here's kind of an example of that. Hit the new task. It's the very bottom one. Mark online as missing. Again, this works on your 10-second data, so you're going to want to do this for only those time frames which you really are missing data that is unrecoverable. Just select where you're missing the data from. This is which 8864, or whatever was had the problem. Mark it as online, and then hit finish. And again, just like with all these actions, the recalculations and all that, re-reporting is done for you automatically. New feature we've added in the source administration is the ability to specify the number of points when adding a new 8864. So if you're adding a new 8864 to your system, you can now specify, hey, I have this many digital inputs, this many digital outputs, so on and so forth, starting at these addresses. When I enter in this new source, go ahead and create all those points for me. Those are what's going to be on my 8864 that I'm going to communicate with. Here's kind of an example of that screen. So this is adding a new source. We've selected an 8864. You don't have to put anything in here if you don't want to create anything, but you have the ability to say, okay, I want to have 24 analog inputs starting at address 1, and then I want to have these analog outputs starting at this address. So you can do all that from this one screen, and then it will create those however many points for you. There is some validation in here that ensures things aren't overlapping, addresses are correct, numbers kind of match up with what the 8864 is expecting. You can't go over the total number of points, things like that. So should be pretty handy when you're adding a new system to go ahead and do it all in one setup. We've added a new administration screen, the new reasons and actions editor. So this is a completely new administration screen in the administration section of Prism that allows for you for editing and creating these 4 types of objects in the Prism system: compliance reasons, compliance actions, downtime reasons, and downtime actions. So you can go in here and now modify those, create new ones, whatever you need to, you can do those. These are the same reasons and actions that are shown up on your compliance reports for, if you have like an exceedance report or downtime report that you run, whenever you have an exceedance come in that gets coded with a specific reason and action, those are the reasons and actions you're editing here that show up on that report that gets turned in to the authority. So administration, SIMs and sites, here's the new page, reason and action configuration. Just click on that, it'll bring it up. It's actually all in a single page. So the very top item here is what you're editing. Here's the 4 different types of objects. You can switch between editing all 4 of those different ones on this same page. Since they're all pretty similar, they're basically just a name and description mostly. So you can see the listing there on the left of the different reasons we already have. You can kind of select through them and then change the properties of it. On the right hand side, save or discard. Plus button is there to help you add a new reason and action as well if you want. So it works similar to the other administration screens, basic editing flow for those reports. So those are the main features I kind of wanted to go over. There's some additional miscellaneous features, and again, if you're interested, shoot me an email or encourage you to read the release notes. They have a lot more detail than I'm able to put in this webinar here, as well as all the bug features as well. I just didn't really have time to do that in the webinar, and plus I didn't want to bore everybody to death with listing a whole bunch of bug features. But yeah, the release notes come out. If you need a copy of them, don't have one, let me know. Let anyone ESC Spectrum know. We can get that over for you. I believe it's in the community, but that has more detail if you're interested. Some of the release miscellaneous features that are kind of worth mentioning. Some changes to the help links. We've been updated those to get you to the right page on the customer portal, community portal. Some of the tag changes do not require a restart or a refresh of the tag service. So if that affected you before, hopefully that's fixed. On the probe configuration page, you can now correctly set the reporting group that the probe belongs to. Source table creation, this was, I think, just a bug. If you were creating a source table in the past, it's been fixed. Hide digital output tags, so if you weren't able to hide digital outputs on the overview page, that's now been fixed. Calibration detail report, we had a request / bug filing to use the 24-hour clock as opposed to the 12-hour. QA test deadlines is now updated when the test reason is QA and or diagnostic. Miscellaneous smaller bug fixes come through quick. So now where the exact minute and second server installer, if you were upgrading or installing data collector services for inactive sources, say you had some old Spectra packs in the database or something like that, sometimes the server installer would fail. That's been corrected. Missing data, we did have some EPA rule interpretations that were clarified for us on missing data in some instances. Looking back more than 2160 look back hours. We have more detail on that again in the release notes if you're curious about that. Prevent the recalculation of minute data when the source data, the 10-second data, is missing. So that could before be a problem where we would get into this loop of looking for data that we were never going to have because the 10-second data had been purged. So that's been fixed. Instrument configuration, when changing the instrument span, could not enter a decimal value. That's been changed. Auto manager, if you've seen this when you're switching out bottles, bottle manager, sometimes the data log message was incorrect about which instruments were affected. Calibrations, another edge case where if you failed and then passed within that same hour, they were sometimes being marked as failed. So that single hour change has been made. And we had some mercury rounding instruments with significant figures, kind of blamed on the EPA and their lack of clarity, but at any rate, that's been fixed, and that's in Prism 2.0 as well. Other additional ones, NOx rate calc incorrect, extremely small numbers were causing an issue when being sent as a math constant. That had to do with we were sending those as scientific notation, which wasn't being interpreted correctly, and that was causing some really weird things. That's been fixed. Ignore backup data setting, that one's been fixed. Object associations in editor. Oops. Meeting request. Inconsistent behavior when duplicate entries were in the associations table. That's now we display a warning if you're trying to create a duplicate entry into the object associations editor. CGA module bottle selection criteria. It was incorrectly saying that the gas concentrations were invalid. That logic that checks, okay, you need your low bottle needs to be a certain percent of span. That kind of logic has been updated and fixed for the CGA module. Linearity module display disable sequences pop up when temporarily disabling the sequences. Linearity module pop up wouldn't close, it would kind of be a delay. That's been fixed. Database updater recalculate for reporting group. This was a change that it was actually using the wrong identifier. It was using the tag identifier as opposed to the reporting group. So if you had an issue where you were trying to recalculate data for an entire unit, That could have been incorrect. That's been fixed. Linearity modules missing some DLLs as part of the installer. That's been fixed as well. Those DLLs have been included in the installer. So that's pretty much all I had for this presentation. Is there any questions from anybody or anything?
It looks like we have a question. Are old emissions files saved in the database? Did you hear that, Landon?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't. I missed it.
Very good. Are old emissions files saved in the database?
Emissions files. You mean, I assume you're talking about when running an emissions report. If you run an emissions report through the new ECMPS 2.0 emissions module, that is saved in the database as long as it's JSON. We didn't do the backwards compatibility with the XML because that's going away supposedly soon. But if you run a new JSON report for any emissions or QA/QC report, yes, that's automatically saved for you in the database, just so you have it. So you can go back and look at it using the viewer at any time, or you can go back and re-export it if you need to as well. Yep.
The next question we have is, will Prism stop collecting data if the license expires, and will you still be able to access the client?
Good question. I probably should have made that clearer. No, it will not stop collecting data. Your data collector services will run as normal. You will have the alarm that will be going off, which hopefully triggers your SIMS fault so that everyone will know there's a problem with the license. I think the qualified data will stop. So your hourly data, I'll have to double check on that. I don't think that will be calculated, but it will still be collecting your raw data, so you aren't going to have any downtime or anything like that. Your data will still be coming in, but I believe your qualified data will stop. The client will not be able to connect. It will require a license to be able to connect up. Yep.
Awesome. Do we have any more questions? If you do, go ahead and place them in the right-hand chat panel. Give a few seconds. If we don't have any more questions, that'll conclude our live webinar today. Landon, if you don't have anything else, we are good to end the webinar.
Nothing on my end. Thanks everybody for attending.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.